The views and content expressed on the following program are provided solely for informational and entertainment purposes. They do not constitute legal advice. A podcast is not a substitute for retaining a competent, licensed attorney to advise you on your specific legal situation.
Break the business, play is work and work is play. Power into creators, have fun along the way. Break the business, doing what it takes. Celebrate success and learn from the mistakes.
How's it going, everybody? Welcome to the show. It is time for Break the Business, where we empower indie creators and have some fun along the way. I'm Ryan Kairalla, and it is a pleasure to have you here this week. I'm excited for this week's show. Episode 501 is going to bring it. I am thrilled for this particular installment. Top to bottom, we got some great stuff for you. Our guest in the second segment is going to be Kimball Gallagher, the founder of global music education NGO 88 International. This is our second week in a row where we've had a really dynamic social entrepreneur who's using the power of music and art to make a huge global impact as a guest on this program. So I love that. I love hearing about the stories of great social entrepreneurs using the power of music. I think you all as creators can learn from the example of these dynamic professionals. And maybe you think to yourself, hey, I'm great at art. I have a bit of a social conscience myself. I got a few entrepreneurial skills that I picked up. Let me use my art as a force for good and found a nonprofit, found an NGO. You can absolutely do it. And one way to help you get there is to talk with the people who've already paved the way, like our guest this week, Kimball Gallagher. I'm excited for that conversation in the second segment. And though I am in a good mood, because I'm always in a good mood when I get to talk to you all on Break the Business, I do have to admit something. There is a part of me that is, I don't know how else to put it, broken. I'm a little broken this week because sports broke me. Sports broke me badly. You loyal viewers and listeners of this program know that I am from South Florida. Know that I am an alum of the University of Miami, a professor, in fact, at the University of Miami. I bleed orange and green. And you know I am a particularly vocal fan of the University of Miami's football team. And you might have known that recently the University of Miami was in a rather significant football game, the College Football Playoff National Championship, that I had the pleasure of attending in person. I went to this game because it was in South Florida. The stadium's about 20 minutes from my house. I went to that game. It was exciting. It was thrilling. I've never been to a football game that intense before. But unfortunately, it ended in a way that was not so favorable to those of us who are University of Miami fans. 2 minutes on the clock, we're driving down the field, a touchdown wins the game, and our quarterback throws an interception. Game over. We lose the championship. I am crushed. I'm still mentally recovering from it. It's painful, man. There's nothing like losing a championship game. I don't understand. I don't know how I let sports do this to me. Let me bring in producer Lauren here because I want to see if maybe she has some thoughts on this. How are you, Lauren?
I am well. I'm not sure why it's not adding me here.
I can hear you for what it's
I
worth, but
know.
I can't see
I
your
see.
picture.
Oh, you know why?
There we are. Hi.
Hi, how are you? I'm glad you could see me. It's because I was playing with things like this that our audience can't see, but it's not playing with things.
Graphics.
How are you doing, Ryan?
Well, as you know, I'm happy to be on the show with you. I'm happy that we are now on our 501st episode, our post-500 era. But I'm a little broken because that game broke me. And what I'm trying to figure out is I like to pride myself on being a pretty rational guy. By virtue of being a lawyer, clients pay me for my rationality, right? You don't want a lawyer who flies off the handle, who gets like emotionally unstable. You want your attorney to be somewhat of a steady Eddie. And for the most part, I try very much to be, but for some reason, sports, and particularly sports that involves my alma mater, the University of Miami, can affect me in ways that kind of frustrate me. Like, these are teenagers, producer Lauren. I should not let a children's game played by teenagers affect me the way that this game affected me, but it did because I was there. I was in person. We could take, oh, there I am with a friend of Break the Business, Josh Morales. There we are at the game, surrounded by Indiana fans, by the way.
Miserable
Our
one.
section was a sea of red, and boy, do those Indiana fans travel well. It was supposed to be a home game for us, but you wouldn't know it from looking at the stands in that game because it was almost all Indiana around us. I mean, I don't know how this happens to me, Lauren. It's just a game, but like it's going to take me years to get over that finish.
Yeah, well, I was showing that only because there was a more miserable attorney out there. It might be the gentleman you went with.
Yeah.
And that probably didn't help. Like you're going to be recovering from the traumatic game and the trauma that your dear friend had to go through. And you had to hold him for all of that. Like, it's going to be okay. You're going to make it back to work tomorrow. It's okay.
I have nothing but gratitude for him, though, because he was the one who helped us get the tickets to that game. So we wouldn't have even have gone through that unspeakable tragedy without him. But yeah, he's perhaps the only person more broken about that outcome than I am, or perhaps the actual football players who play for the football team are. But it was tough. Like I feel like a weight on me. I can hear it in my voice. I still have the laryngitis in my throat, and it's been about 96 hours since the game. It's been a bit, 72 hours. It's been a while, but like, this like phlegm I have is not going away because of how much we were yelling and screaming and how
It's also
much that
'cause
game
you've
took a
cried.
toll on my body.
You've cried every night since, so it's not going to get better for a while. You
And
have to
during
give
the
your
day
voice a
too.
break.
Like, I literally just stopped crying right when the theme song ended so I could do this show. And when we wrap up, I'm going to go right back to crying again because that was absolutely traumatic. But I do thank you, producer Lauren, because I wouldn't have been able to go through that horrific experience had you not watched Nathan. So that was great.
I was doing the math the other day to figure out if he's been at my house or your house more days this year.
Since the start of 2026, it's close.
I mean, like, it hasn't been that many days in 2026, but we're coming close.
I mean, I can tell you which house he has enjoyed staying at more in 2026. He definitely
'cause,
loves
like,
hanging out with his cool Aunt Lauren.
It's like Disney World over here. It's great to not be the parent. Yes.
You seem to have figured out, because you are one of 4 children, and rather than like have children and deal with like all of the being the bad guy that comes with being a parent, you have just been like the cool aunt for all of your nephews and nieces, and they all love you and you're the favorite, and that seems like a pretty cool way to live your adult existence.
I said that back in, I can quote myself in middle school when my to-be sister-in-law was talking to me about, well, don't you want to have kids? And I said, no, I don't want to be a parent. I want to be the favorite. And like, I had that connection.
And you have to
that,
pick
like,
one. You can't
yeah,
be both. You're either the
if you were
parent or
going
the
to be
favorite.
the parent, you were never going to be the favorite. Like the kids are going to want to run away from home at some point. And I wanted to be the one they ran away to and not the one they ran away from. So, and it's important to have a safe place to run away to or to escape to or to like have your vent zone, because I don't want them going to some of the other people in worlds out there. Like, safe space. So I enjoy giving that to all of the kiddos. I love them. Other people's children are great. Just like other people's pets. Love them.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's like, and it's sort of like when your friend has like a pickup truck or a boat, right? You can enjoy it when you need it, but when you're done with it, like it's somebody else's problem.
That's right.
Or a pool. A pool is like the same way too. It's always
I don't
better
know
when
if
your
you
friend
want
has
to
one.
refer to your child as a problem, though.
I mean, he'd be the first to admit it. I was 15 minutes late for our for the call for this show because my son was dragging out bedtime, as he is so good at doing. Nobody can filibuster an extension on his bedtime like my 3-year-old. Anyway, got a couple news stories here that I'd like to get through before we bring in our guests this week that I think are pretty interesting ones, both of which have happened this month. First, I'd like to talk about a company that we don't talk about nearly enough, but I think it says something that every time we do talk about these guys, it's always for something good. Like, if Spotify is in the news, it's probably going to be a negative story. I can't remember the last positive thing we've had to say about Spotify. But when Bandcamp is in the news, it's always about something really chill that Bandcamp did. I don't know who's running that outfit over there, but it must just be just a bunch of real awesome people who just do awesome things all the time. And yet again, we get to report yet another Bandcamp W here. On January 13th, Bandcamp has announced that it is going to place a ban on AI-generated songs on the platform. The company announced this on a January 13th Reddit post. Specifically, Bandcamp is no longer permitting songs that use generative AI in, quote, all or a substantial part of their process on the platform. It also noted that it will not allow the use of any AI tools that, quote, impersonate other artists or styles. Now, to be fair, it's not clear from the announcement how Bandcamp is going to determine which songs use AI substantially and which ones do not. And media outlets have requested comment on this. We haven't heard much yet. But I mean, to me, this is a nice announcement because even though it's not always easy to determine what songs are AI generated and which ones are not, it's nice to see any large platform make a clear statement about this is not something we're going to allow in our place. And we're going to do our best to try to find the artists that or find the songs that are doing this, and Bandcamp is not going to be the place for them. And it's nice to hear that kind of mission statement. It's definitely a stark contrast to other platforms that are either being more AI agnostic or even AI encouraging, because less money paid to artists is more money to put in their pockets. And again, this is just Bandcamp being a bunch of real dudes, and us loving them for it. And I'm eager to see how they do this in practice and how workable it is, because I'd love to see if this is a sustainable kind of model.
Yeah, that's my question, is the how, right? Made me think that you almost want like an entirely different platform where it's like, look, if you want to go play in the world of AI generated music, go to aimusic.com and play with all the AI music for eternity. But yeah, there should be a place where you go where you're like, yeah, but these are live artists making live music for you that are real artists. And you can't differentiate if the platforms aren't doing anything to at least encourage it. I mean, even if they don't enforce it well, it's nice that they made a statement saying, we value live artistry, and though you can do what you want with AI, like, don't do it here. It's nice to hear somebody say that, so that if you're producing AI and shoving it out there as your own stuff anyway, you're doing it wrong because it's now been stated.
Yeah.
So even though it's hard to enforce, it's nice that they said it.
And I like the idea of this principle you bring up of like separate platforms, right? If you want to consume this music, and I don't begrudge people who find generative AI interesting in the abstract. I find it very interesting in the abstract. I think this technology is cool. I think it's neat in a lot of ways. I don't like it as a substitute of art and people creating stuff, because I would much rather hear art from an artist than from a computer. But I think there's a place for it. I mean, AI generated memes are funny sometimes, but I don't want it to replace artists. I don't want it to replace human generated art. I don't want it to, I don't want to see a computer in concert. And so I think there's different places for it. And if you're wondering, like, should my platform be a place where this kind of art can be found? I think you have to look to your own mission statement. Right? When you look at Bandcamp's mission statement, for example, they say right in their mission statement, quote, our goal is to build a community where artists thrive. So if you're saying we exist so artists can thrive, that is completely against, you can't believe that and have AI generated artists on your platform, because if you're allowing that music, you're not allowing artists to thrive, or they're thriving less because now some of the money is going to non-artist art. Similarly, and so if you're Bandcamp, it makes perfect sense that you'd make this decision. It's completely in line with your mission. Contrast that with Spotify, and we've talked about on the show before how their mission statement is also similarly pro-artist. Their mission statement says that they're going to provide a platform where, quote, 1 million creative artists can earn a living from their art. But Spotify has also allowed AI generated music on their platform. We've had a couple notable stories about that. So that's
Their goal
going
is
against your
making a
mission.
living? I totally missed that part. Their mission statement includes the goal of having them make a living on their platform?
Yes, one,
Wow.
three 100ths of a cent at a time, or whatever the hell their per stream rate is. Right. So so even under the best of circumstances, Spotify is not meeting their mission, but they certainly aren't meeting their mission when they're allowing AI generated music on their platform. And let's put it to you this way, okay? Maybe it's going to be hard in every single case to know when a song is AI generated or not. But you know when it's easy to figure that out? When there's no doubt, when the people who create the music are specifically saying it's AI generated, right? There are AI generated artists who are getting signed to record deals, whatever the hell that means. There are AI artists who are hitting the Billboard Hot 100 now. So there are certainly people who are not hiding the fact that AI is what's making this art and not actual human beings.
I
And
missed
so
that.
for at least those low-hanging fruits, Bandcamp can say, okay, you're not allowed in our clubhouse because like you're basically making it very clear to us that there's no humans involved in the making of this art. And so that one's easy. And let's start with those ones, and then maybe we can, figure out what we do about the gray area cases later. It's also worth celebrating, producer Lauren, that this is not the only platform that has made these kind of strong statements recently. Recently, iHeartRadio has banned AI songs on its radio stations nationwide through a new program called, quote, Guaranteed Human that they launched last November. And as part of that initiative, iHeart removed AI artists like Zanya Monet and other AI-assisted talent from their platform. Good. It's nice to see stuff like that.
Yeah. It's nice to know you have a place you can go without questioning it, as it were. I mean, you're always going to question it in today's day and age. It's like GMO in the music industry. We've got we need genetically modified food and genetically modified music. We've got they're not real people, but sometimes you want to know what you're consuming in one way or the other. Like I would like my natural music, please.
That's exactly, I think disclosure certainly matters, right? Like
Right.
people should know that the person that they're listening to, or rather the song they're listening to, might feature an artist that they can't go see live in concert someday if they fall in love with that music, because
Right.
it's not somebody that you're going to be able to go see in a concert because it's just a AI generated something or other. And again, like I am the first to admit that like I'm not 100% against this platform, against this technology. It has its applications. It has its applications in my line of work.
Yeah.
There are a lot of legal thinkers out there who have basically come out and say that if lawyers are not looking into the possibilities that generative AI has to help lawyers do their job better and to save their clients money, that they're actually doing their clients a disservice by not finding those efficiencies. So there are applications for this technology in a wide range of fields. But once it comes at the expense of like humans making art, and then the art suffers and the artists suffer, that's not something I want to see. And certainly when those platforms like Suno or even ChatGPT are training their platforms on the works of human artists, and those artists are not being compensated, that's
a problem.
That's certainly a problem too. And last week, Lauren, we talked about on the podcast how one of the things that I wanted to start doing after episode 500 was talking about big reforms that we have to make to the industry to help independent creators, not nibbling around the edges stuff, not, we got to increase Spotify's payouts a little bit, or we have to do some window dressing copyright reform, like real big stuff that's actually going to matter. That's the stuff, actually breaking the business.
It's time to join like Clyde Lawrence at Congress and be like, we've got to fix things.
Yeah, but like big fixes. And so one of the things that I've thought about is with a lot of these platforms, because right now, one of the biggest problems that we have right now, the reason why artists are losing out in this new industry is because big tech is generating a lot of equity, a lot of value on the backs of art. Platforms like YouTube, or Spotify or Twitch, TikTok, they are Suno, AI platforms. They're all, the one thing they have in common is they're all making a lot of money off of the intellectual property and art and talents of creators. And maybe those creators get a little bit of money as royalties, but what they're not actually getting is any of the value of the company. If those same artists were employees at Twitch or at Suno or at YouTube, they'd get stock options. They'd be able to participate in the long-term future growth of those companies they're helping build. But since they're not employees, they don't get those stock options. And so I would love to see a greater legislative push for all of these kinds of tech platforms, including AI platforms that are creating their value off the IP of artists, to create some kind of, whether it's a token model or phantom equity or stock options, where we require that these companies set aside a percentage of their shares, 10%, whatever it is, 15%, like an option pool for artists. And we use a sound exchange like model where, the more engagement you get overall as an artist, the more of this equity pool you get, so that you can actually get long-term wealth from your art and not just royalties when somebody downloads your song a single time. I think something like that for AI platforms would seem fair.
Yeah, you want to support a culture where we support and value artists. And by building, like you're saying, infrastructure where major companies pay into something that's kind of regulated for distribution, you can show more value universally to the entertainment industry versus like, well, I value that artist, but not that artist, but I'm going to like pay you, but not you, versus like, we need to build in something that shows that we value the art in general and the people creating it and the infrastructure that needs to go into the creation of it and the supporting of it and the yada, yada, yada. So yeah, some kind of infrastructure where there was some kind of requirement to set aside money for the creators, I think is good in all forms.
Well, not even just money, equity, right?
Equity,
because
right.
we have
continual money, residual income.
like pieces of these companies, right? Because we have, TikTok has a creator fund where we set aside some money, and if your video goes viral, we'll send you a check, which is nice to get that check, but you're not going to get that check again when your video falls out of favor, and then you have to make more videos and you're on this content treadmill. Whereas, people who invest, who put their sweat equity into a company, they get shares, they get stock options. So residual that value income stays with them long after they've worked for the company. That's the kind of thing we need to see artists get, because these companies are creating equity or creating shareholder value off the backs of this art. And these artists are not being able to participate in it. I think that would be one way to make these AI platforms a lot more equitable.
Yeah, it's hard in the indie industry, right? Because that happened a lot in the television industry back in the day. You had a lot of sitcoms that you had some people get written into residual incomes, but a lot of people, women, children, a lot of the youth actors didn't get any kind of residual income, and that stuff is running in syndication for eternity and they see nothing. And so because of that, they've built into contracts now that like, no, if you start replaying this stuff for eternity, or if you sell it to Netflix for distribution, like we get a piece of that. It's more difficult with the indie world because you can't group together as indie artists. You don't have unions that can help band together for things. So we get back to our continual issue of how do indie creators get that same kind of group formation to get support.
It is hard, right? And ultimately that's the thing that we run into is people are just, how does this work in practice? How do you come up with the formula? But those things can be figured out. We have existing models we can work on. And the fact that something is hard on its own can't be the reason why we don't do it, because what we have now is not even remotely fair. And if we can at least improve it, and there are models that we can start with, right? Sound exchange does set a precedent for how this can work in practice, where right now, when a song is played on Sirius XM radio, we have a mechanism to get artists paid when that music is played on Sirius XM, a direct royalty payment that goes to artists. How do they set it up? All of the artists all the recording artists sign up for a platform called Sound Exchange. All their information's in there. And when royalties are generated, Sound Exchange can figure out like what artists got, how much each artist got paid or whatever, or how much each artist got played on satellite radio, and then can pay out those Sound Exchange royalties to artists accordingly. If you can do it for digital performance royalties, I don't see why you can't do it for stock options for one of these big tech platforms that use content. It seems to me that it should be workable in practice. So we have an existing model. We just need to have, put more research into it. We need to get more of a legislative push behind it.
They're already tracking your views. It's not like, I couldn't tell how many of those got played at that bar or that concert, or as we're going to talk about later, at that house or whatever. Like, you can't track that as easily as like, I know how many views I got on on Spotify, how many people listen to my song. I know it.
The data is there. And thanks to platform and thanks to technology like blockchain and tokens and things like that, we have smart contracts. Like, we have ways to distribute these assets more efficiently than ever before. And so I think the infrastructure is largely there. We just need to see more of a push for it. And I hope to see this more in time. And another theme, let me just quickly mention this before we go to break here. Another theme that we brought up on last week's show, our wonderful episode 500, was this idea of when we started Break the Business a decade ago, Lauren, the big enemy that we were fighting against was big media, was the record labels. We were trying to get artists to run away from record labels, to go independent, to have control over your career, to not be controlled by others. And 10 years later, as we did episode 500, one of the things I said on that show is I kind of regret and lament the fact that in the last 10 years, artists have mainly shook off the yoke of big media. You don't need a record label anymore to achieve success as an artist. But unfortunately, we traded the shackles of big media and labels for the shackles of big tech. And AI platforms and Spotify and all this stuff. And, that's our new enemy. And so it's hard to kind of celebrate losing that, shaking off that first enemy and allowing artists to go independent. But I did find one story that in a weird way made me kind of think of, I'm glad that artists can be independent now. And it was the story I read in Billboard on January 6th, a sad story about Stacey Orico. I don't know if you remember Stacey Orico, from the 2000s. I loved her song "Stuck" when I was in high school. I was a big pop fan. I really enjoyed this song, but I hadn't heard much from Stacey Orico in about 20 years, and I never really knew why. Like, I just figured that she was one of these artists that fell out of maybe just was kind of like a two-hit wonder or whatever, and decided to go off in a different direction. It turns out, as we found out recently, that she's gone through some difficult issues with her label and her management back from the 2000s. Let me just lay out the story here. On January 6th, Stacey Orico filed a lawsuit claiming that back when she was 14 years old, about 20 years ago, she was sexually abused, allegedly by her former manager. The lawsuit names her former manager as well as Universal Music Group, her label at the time, claiming that the label knew about this and didn't say anything, didn't report anything because they prioritized their financial interests over Stacey Orico's safety. Now, Stacey is 39 years old, and she's filing the suit under the California Child Victims Act, which extended the state statute of limitations for claims of childhood sexual abuse. So if you're wondering, well, how can she file this suit 2 decades later? That's the reason why, because of this California law that extended the statute of limitations. And so, like, while I'm sad that, artists have largely traded the yoke of big media for the yoke of big tech, I am happy that, as we are seeing fewer and fewer cases like this Stacey Orico case. Like, the fact that this was a 20-year-old case is sort of a testament to the idea that now that artists are more independent, you're seeing fewer and fewer artists that get stuck in long-term management deals, fewer and fewer artists that are getting stuck in long-term label deals, where environments like this can't happen. And
Right.
I don't know what happened between Stacey Orico and her former manager. None of us do, and I don't want to speculate. But I'll say the same thing that I said about 10 years ago when we had the Kesha Dr. Luke scenario, which is we don't know what happened exactly, and there are multiple sides to the story, but we can all agree that clearly the relationship between those two people was not a positive one. Bad stuff had to have happened. Whatever that bad stuff was is for the courts to decide, but it certainly wasn't a positive relationship between the two of them. But unfortunately, in the old music industry, where you had long-term management agreements where artists could not get out when things got bad, there was no mechanism to get out of a bad situation like that. When you were stuck with one of these managers that was creating a toxic environment for you, you were stuck in it because there is no way to get out of one of these management agreements. And it only becomes worse when you are also similarly stuck in a major label deal where you have a label that is putting additional pressure on you to not upset the apple cart. So, a lot of things about the modern entertainment industry are not things I'm happy about, but one thing I do love is the fact that it's easier than ever to become independent and to go your own way in your career as a creator, which means there's less of a chance that you're going to be stuck with one of these kinds of managers that take over your entire life and labels that take over your entire life. And you can go your own way and get away from toxic people and toxic relationships.
Less people sweeping things under the rug so that it doesn't hurt their reputation because it's all, I mean, that's a lot of pressure on you too as an independent artist. But yeah, there's something about not being trapped under it. You used to often say there's a clause where you can get out of a marriage, but there isn't a clause where you can get out of a record contract or a management contract.
Wow, you do listen to past episodes. Yeah, I've said that. I've said that one a lot. When artists come to me and say, "Should I do this management deal?" I'll usually respond to something along the lines of, "Just so you know, you're getting into a business relationship that is harder to get out of than a marriage." Like I would sooner recommend that an artist marry their manager than get into a contract with their manager, because the former is a lot easier to get out of if you can believe it.
And frankly, safer in court, right? Like, I don't have to talk ill of you if you're my spouse, but like the managers can trash talk me all day, right?
And I mean, we could do a whole other show on like why
like bad managers,
why I'm very cautious when artists want to get into management agreements. I mean, the short version is a lot, you probably don't need a manager if you're an early career artist. There is a place for managers, and I work with a lot of managers in my legal practice, wonderful, excellent managers. And a lot of those managers would be the first one to tell you that if you come to a manager too early before you've established yourself, you are giving way too much power to that manager. The most successful artist-manager relationships that I've come to know and that I've come to experience are ones where the artist is more established and they come to the manager on a level playing field. And so the artist has the power to be able to, get a management agreement that says, if this isn't working out, I'm going to walk and you're going to be okay with that. And if that's not the relationship you have with your manager, the potential for abuse is so high. And it makes me very nervous as an entertainment lawyer.
The advice I always got is don't bring in a manager until you have a career that needs managing.
Mm-hmm.
You can want to have that career, but until you're like, I cannot manage everything that's coming in, that's when you need to start bringing someone in.
So many artists, and that's an excellent point, see the manager as sort of their Sherpa that gives them the shortcut up music industry mountain. Like, I see that big mountain. I don't want to climb that. That seems like a lot of work.
There.
Let me just sign this contract with this person who says they're going to drag me up the mountain so that I don't have to do the work. That ain't how it works. Any manager who promises you that 999 times out of 1,000 will significantly underdeliver on that guarantee. And the potential for abuse, for a toxic relationship, for really bad stuff that you can't get out of contractually is way too high for it to be an acceptable risk.
Yeah. But when you're ready, you can find some good ones because you're in a position to interview. Find good ones that work with you that will help you manage your career and, like you said, aren't going to create it for you.
That's exactly right. All right, let us take a break. We're going to be joined by our fabulous guest, Kimball Gallagher, next on Break the Business. Break the Business is presented in cooperation with Ryan A. Kairalla, PA. Ryan A. Kairalla, PA is a law firm providing transactional entertainment legal services, including contracts, business formation, commercial law, copyright, trademark, and more. Ryan A. Kairalla, PA, Miami, Florida. rkpalaw.com.
Streaming services for Break the Business provided by LEK Entertainment. LEK Entertainment is a full-service entertainment company offering everything from consultations to full-scale events and productions, including audio and video productions, voiceovers, staged theatrical productions, script and music development, and streaming services. For more information, visit lekentertainment.com. LEK Entertainment wants to help you bring your story to life.
Thanks for supporting Break the Business. If you have a question or topic that you want us to discuss, email us at breakthebusiness@gmail.com. You can follow the host, that's me, on Twitter at Ryan Kair, and you can follow the show at the BTB Podcast. Be sure to subscribe to the show on Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook, and on all major podcast platforms. And now, let's get back to the show. The other thing that annoys me, Producer Lauren, about these kinds of stories where these you see these artists from like the 90s and the 2000s who had songs that you really enjoy, and then you don't hear from them again, and maybe you think it's because that artist didn't have hits, but really what it is at some point in their career, either the artist label or management or both decided that that artist isn't worth investing in anymore, that they're not worth the trouble. And so they just kind of sit on that artist's career until it fizzles out. They don't let them out of the deal right away. They keep them stuck in this sort of purgatory. And unfortunately, in the worst kinds of cases, there may even be abuse. But even in the ones where there isn't, you still have artists like, that you and I grew up with, like JoJo.
That can't create and can't release. And,
And I really liked JoJo's music when I was a kid, as I really liked Stacey Areko's music when I was a kid. But because of the, label manager industrial complex that existed 20 years ago, where you couldn't, where there was a gatekeeper between the people who made music and the people who consume music, we missed out on so much great art from these artists. And during those 20 years in between, and that
I feel for you. I do feel for you. I kind of feel more for the artists and the creators who, most people don't even notice what they don't notice. If they're not creating music that you get to hear, you don't know they're creating music. But these creators that are being stuck in a position where they cannot release their music, they cannot record their music, they have no right to, they can create as much as they want, they have no right or ability to share it with anyone. And that seems traumatizing to a creator. I can't even fathom that. Like, I'm not going to outweigh one abuse over another abuse or anything like that, but to an artist, I just can't imagine anything being more torturesome than stopping your ability to share anything you create.
Yeah. Say what you will about the current entertainment industry, and there is a lot that you can say if you were to say what you will. But make no mistake, one of its few virtues right now that I think a lot of young creators take for granted, because this wasn't the case 20, 30 years ago, is all of the barriers that existed between the person making art and the people who want to experience that art have been removed. 30 years ago, in our lifetime, Producer Lauren, the idea that you could make a piece of art in Florida and somebody could effortlessly consume that art in Thailand instantly, without any supply chains or barriers or distributors or labels or TV networks, would be unheard of. And today it's as simple as breathing. And, there's not a lot there's a lot I don't like about the current state of affairs in entertainment, but that's one thing that I unmistakably enjoy and is a win for artists. Welcome back, by the way, to Break the Business, everybody. Ryan Kairalla here with producer Lauren. Thank you all for checking out episode 501. And thank you for checking us out wherever you check us out, whether it's on SiriusXM 145, on all major podcast platforms, volume.com, Twitch, wherever you check us out. We're just so darn glad that you are. And also, we are so darn glad to bring in our guest this week. I am excited for this one. He is a Juilliard-trained concert pianist and an acclaimed social entrepreneur. He is the founder of 88 International, a nonprofit that uses music education and performance to inspire leadership, creativity, and civic engagement among young people in countries like Tunisia, Morocco, Senegal, the Gambia, Myanmar, and beyond. This April, our guest will be playing Carnegie Hall in a solo recital for the first time in more than a decade. You can find out more about our guest's work by visiting 88international.org. That's 88international.org and KimballGallagher.com. We are happy to welcome Kimball Gallagher on to Break the Business. Hello.
Hello. How are you? Good to be here.
Doing well. My sports team broke my heart over the weekend, but I am powering through it. And that sadness, I feel, is greatly outweighed by the joy I have in getting to chat with you and just learning more about your amazing story. I want to begin at the beginning with you. I read that you kind of pushed back on learning music when you were younger and then kind of rediscovered it later in life on your own, which sort of goes against the story we often hear of people who reach the heights that you reach in music, right? If I assume that if somebody is playing Carnegie Hall and doing music all over the world, that like they were playing piano coming out of the womb and never stopped since, but your story was apparently different.
Well, my father was my first piano teacher, and it was kind of like what they say about the Tiger Moms. I had to play passages on the piano 5 times in a row without making a mistake before I could leave the, piano bench. And if you make a mistake at the end of the last time, you got to go back to 0.
Oh,
sounds fun.
Our father, I don't know if you knew this, Ryan, but he said he won't play piano anymore because he had one of the teachers that would whack your finger anytime you played wrong.
Oh, like with the ruler?
With the ruler,
Oh,
that
yeah.
would whack your hands. Like that was a thing.
Well,
Brutal piano player.
I'm sure after having starting over after getting through 4 9/10 of a piece, Kimball would have just rather somebody smack him on the hand.
That's right.
So
No,
how did you sort of after those kind of that tough upbringing with music, how did you rediscover it? Because what you're describing sounds like a recipe for I don't even want to look at a piano again.
Yeah, those were the initial years. Then I put up enough resistance and finally quit when I was 10. I took up electric guitar, started writing my own songs. And then we had a friend of our family who has unfortunately passed away in 2015, but he was a professional pianist and he would come to visit the house every year or so. And I had sort of come around to my own, just tinkering on the piano here and there, not having structured lessons, not having a teacher. And he heard me. And he sort of said, when I was 14 or 15, he said, you should think about doing something with this. Maybe you can put together a small concert. And it was supposed to be a concert, in the living room of our home or something like that. But it ended up being at the local piano store. And I had 50 or 60 people and just my friends and their parents and stuff like that. And then this friend of our family, Joseph Smith, he sent the tape to a man named Seymour Bernstein, who is parenthetically was his teacher, and parenthesis within the parenthesis, Ethan Hawke made the famous actor Ethan Hawke made a documentary about him called Seymour: An Introduction, and there's a fun scene in there with myself, Joseph Smith, and Seymour Bernstein, and I'm trying to tell them that I read a NASA article about the note B flat resonating 57 octaves below middle C to invoke sort of a metaphysical mindset in an audience before playing a piece in that same key of B flat. Anyway, it's a funny scene, but I digress. So Seymour Bernstein got me set up at New England Conservatory pre-college, and then I got a piano teacher, and I was sort of often running on my own. Ended up going to Rice University for undergraduate in in music and piano, and then went to Juilliard. And that's sort of the early education years in a nutshell.
So wait, help me out. Help me understand like those years after you quit for the first time. Like, were you getting any formal piano training before you went to college?
Well, it started really in that age 15. So for about 2
Okay.
years before I went to college, I had the formal training, and I had that year sort of with working with this friend of our family, Joseph Smith, and we were living in Boston. He was living in New York, so I did have some lessons with him, but it wasn't kind of the conventional, typical once a week, regular thing. It was sort of on my own with his guidance, and I had this sort of background with my father put in place. So I had some, ability to play at that point, but was just propelled through my own, willpower, I
Yeah.
guess.
All right. Well, let me ask you
Yeah.
this now, and we are going to talk about 88 International because this is a really cool organization that's having a wonderful global impact. But selfishly, as a father of a young 3-year-old, who would certainly love for this kid to be able to do some ivory tickling later in his life, is there any lesson from your own life that I could apply when trying to figure out how to, get piano into my son's life? Like, should I start him early? Should I, not push him at a young age? Should I, what might you recommend? Like, what would you wish that like at a young age, like would be the way that you got into piano?
Actually, I would tie it into sort of what I like to talk about in general. It's just I think it's fun when kids have community. And so, when I taught a lot of piano students, we would bring them together a few times per semester. We had it structured in a semester, and they would hear other kids their age. A lot of them played the same or similar pieces they had played before. That added, some highlights. I think having a performance every few months is really important, and that's when you sort of consolidate the gains, if you will. And a lot of kids get really nervous, and then they get freaked out, but then they kind of push through and do it anyway. And it's a very rare child that after performing a piece of any length, even a 4 second, 4 seconds, 10 seconds, 30 seconds, even these very simple piano pieces that, 4 and 5 and 6 and 7 year olds play sometimes as a beginner, they're usually just very pleased that they've done this work. They've presented themselves in public. There's all these other skills that come out of learning a piece, possibly memorizing it, performing it, getting up in front of a group, taking a bow. It develops, such a sense of I guess, self assurance, self confidence in a very positive way, I find. And these things can make it really something that I think a child starts to look forward to, and it kind of gives other reasons besides kind of what I was describing initially, just this sheer, the repetition, the dailiness of the practicing, and things like that.
Applause.
And it doesn't surprise me in the least that somebody of your background would lean into the community aspect of music as a way to encourage people to stick with an instrument. Certainly, community and the global community is at the core of 88 International. Can you tell the viewers and listeners a bit about this organization and its mission?
Sure thing. Yeah, 88 International, I like to describe it. It is a global nonprofit. We use music to help young people. Our target is really more high school age, adolescents. We help young people in this age group find their voice through creating their own songs, build their own communities. These are organized in music clubs, and then lead positive change wherever they happen to be. And so they need to define, what will that change be? A lot of music clubs, we organize our programs in a music club, the after school music clubs that are student led. They all have to make their own events, and these events often have a theme, and they have to, decide amongst themselves, what is the theme, so this is part of the structure.
So they're not just learning the instrument, they're learning the entertainment industry business, what needs to go into those shows.
Yeah, I would say it
performances anyway.
even before the sort of business elements come up, a lot of the contexts in which we work, they're very, what one might describe as highly teacher centered. These are school systems where the student is perceived very often kind of like an empty glass, and the teacher's job is to fill this glass with knowledge, with what to do. And so a student in that position is very often going to do nothing until told what to do. Whereas we conceive of the students in our clubs, and this is one of the reasons I do believe that 88 international programs have had a lot of impact, is because we take a starkly different, and in a very positive sense, a very different philosophy in this very teacher-centered, these very teacher-centered contexts. We take a student-centered philosophy, and we would treat the student more like, metaphorically, like a seed that one plants. And then your job as a teacher is more about creating an environment, which is very often has a lot to do with community, in which this student can grow very, very naturally. And so our philosophy would be, create this environment, this club, give challenges that may seem big at first, and then give the tools, give the encouragement, and sort of allow the growth to happen as the students lead themselves forward. And in a very kind of teacher-centered context, this type of approach we found can unleash just remarkable energies, creative energies, both musically, but also everything that has to do with taking care of a group. We can call it management. One can use the vocabulary of the business of music, of course. And this is sort of, we can think of these as like micro enterprises or something like that, but these are high school kids hanging out. Some of them do find, sponsorship to do their events. They find partnerships. A lot of these things are verbal. They're not necessarily signing, deals or whatever, but still, and how do we make sure
learning that they can,
learning that they have a role to play. And it comes down to things like, how do we make sure electricity is working in the room? Who's going to take care of the chairs? And a lot of management stuff, like, what do we do if, an important member of our group doesn't show up on time? What if they're 5 minutes late? Maybe that's not a big deal. Well, what if they're 30 minutes late? Well, what if they're late every single time for 4 weeks in a row? And all this kinds of things. And they, this internal kind of, how do they run it? And they have to work through all these things. So we did actually, part of making that terrain fertile, if you will, to continue with this agricultural metaphor, has a lot to do with leadership. And so we find that creativity often flows very, very naturally when there's a clear sense of, where people have roles, they feel that they're participating in these clubs.
Well, that's the element of this that I want to harp on a little bit more, because you're talking about creating an environment through music where young people can thrive. But you're trying to create that environment while also working in developing countries where a lot of aspects of their environment, whether it is poverty or difficult geopolitical circumstances, can make creating that kind of environment difficult. Can you reflect on how you navigate those challenges in the places where you operate?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think it's the most important thing, really, because we look at it from kind of the highest level, practically speaking. We have to make formal agreements with a ministry of education. Those countries, you listed many of them at the beginning: Tunisia, Morocco, Senegal, and Gambia, for example, just to take those an example. In all cases, we have some form of a relationship with the Ministry of Education. So this is public education. So somebody within those ministries has decided, yes, we want to do this. So that's very important, because then as an NGO working alongside, and we do have other partner NGOs within the countries, we have some kind of credibility to be there. And then we can kind of press, sometimes mostly gently pressing, but we have some credibility and we can kind of push this, these after school programs. The other thing is that a lot of the students in the programs, they have virtually no other after school activities. So it's sort of a metaphorical desert in terms of student activities. And this gives us, again, it's sort of a credibility. Why are you here? Why are you doing this? Well, we're providing some sense of opportunities, and opportunities that are not otherwise existing. And so this is sort of the credibility, the backdrop. And then a lot of it has to do with the perceived legitimacy. A lot of it has to do with leadership. And there are indeed a lot of, let's say, teachers and school directors that may find, in the empowerment of students to be inconvenient or uncomfortable or risky or overly political. And so, it's just sort of a lot of these things end up being circular. So there's a lot of advocacy involved. So we would also have, we usually have our alumni network actually become advocates for those clubs, slightly older. These are, of course, former members of our clubs are, of course, one might imagine a lot of them are in college or they've finished high school at least. And that brings more people. The more that one can create community around these clubs, the more one can kind of normalize the idea that a group of teenagers can get together. They can write their own songs, they can make their own events, and there's nothing to be afraid of. Even though we've seen a lot of clubs kind of as a really counterintuitive scenarios where a club will have a teacher as a mentor, supposedly, and then the teacher leaves the club for whatever reason, and the club starts flourishing as soon as the teacher leaves. And you know,
Sounds about
and
right.
so this has become not at all surprising to us, because the teacher represents authority, and in front of authority, everyone's terrified. They don't dare do anything. As soon as the authority leaves the room, people can relax and exhale and start to be themselves and explore. And in an environment that, you know, there's always you're very likely to say the wrong answer at all times, and teachers often use that as a way to control the students by just relentlessly telling that they're wrong all the time. Take that away, and it opens up a lot of possibilities.
It pushes leadership as well. You're talking about, students that have picked it up, and once the teacher's gone, all of a sudden they have gained confidence. It's like, wait, I can do that without them. I know how to do these things. And so that's an added bonus. I've noticed you've mentioned a lot in some of your other works, salon concerts, or what we've called a lot like house concerts and things like that, and how you've brought it back to the small scale. Is that something that you're teaching these students as well, opportunities on how they can create their own opportunities outside of the educational program?
Yes, well, one of our trainings is actually all about event creation, and we do really encourage them to kind of go back to what one might call first principles, and not just default to the way everyone's thinking, oh, we have to go to the local cultural center to have an event. Of course you can, but it might be far more interesting to just think about the places you go to in your normal everyday life, and maybe just have a concert there and ask people to come there, or go to where there are groups of people kind of convening anyway, especially if there are not concerts. Most people think, or most of the people in our music clubs at least, they usually think about what is everyone already doing, and let's go there. And we try to, at least consider the possibility, maybe go to where people are not yet doing concerts and introduce that. That could be more interesting, more creative, more challenging. It provides a sense of being a little bit possibly even special or unusual. And this can provide a lot of motivation for the clubs. I certainly get a huge satisfaction myself out of salon concerts. And I made a whole world tour about exploring putting in music in homes or otherwise spaces that I think are actually incredibly natural, but would not be considered conventional, let's say.
I think of similar to a lot of holiday parties, or when people will tend to bring in salon style concerts. When you have a Christmas party, you'll bring in a piano player and play stuff. But are you finding it's coming into popularity again, or that you're getting a lot of not only yours, but your students' success in like year round kind of impromptu or solely for the purpose of music? Or are you finding that it's more like trying to tack the music onto existing things?
Yeah, that's interesting. I think really all of the above, I would say. When I made this concert tour called the 88 Concert Tour, which was an exploration of salon concert, and this was way back in 2008-9. And I think back then, at least classical musicians, it was sort of a thing. It wasn't very systematized. Now I think it's gotten, at least within the classical world of people that I kind of know, it's a little bit more kind of common. So yeah, I think it should be considered as a something that's very important, especially with audience performer relationship. There's so much that can happen in small spaces, and I always tell musicians that I meet, independent musicians, a lot of audience members, they're craving, an inside look at an artist's life. Artists, a lot of people look up to artists. A lot of the way art is done is kind of mysterious to non-artists. So any access at all can be very interesting for an audience member. And this can happen in a salon concert. And I think there's also a lot of the salon concerts that at least I've performed have been in homes that have not had concerts before. So it would be a stretch to say that one is creating a new venue, but it's approaching that, getting new people to be engaged in the musical process. And, lots of people, I know classical music has this sort of cliched reputation as being boring or whatever. But I do concerts at my own place, my own apartment. And testimonial after testimonial after testimonial of people saying, oh yeah, I thought classical music was so boring, but when I'm sitting 5 feet away from the piano, it's like they can feel the resonance, and it's like they can see it all up close, and it's a lot more vivid. So I think there's a huge possibilities still. And it also helps to liberate the mind a little bit, because at least when I was in school, we were pumped full of all this sort of scarcity mentality. Look how many amazing artists are graduating every year, and look how few opportunities there are. And you're supposed to conclude that it's just hyper competitive. But if one thinks the opposite, if you just pretend that every home or even every space is a potential concert venue, then you don't actually have enough musicians to go around. And then one is engaging, then one engages in, let's say, a creative process rather than a competitive process. And when we approach this, in the developing world, like in countries, I mean, there's endless possibility, endless things to be done. I mean, one still needs to find funds, and I'm not saying it's easy, but music has a role to play in so many parts of so many people's lives that it hasn't even begun to touch. So sorry, I can go on forever.
It's excellent perspective. And
Love it.
on this show, we have been strong proponents for damn near a decade about how great house concerts can be, not just for artists, but for music fans, as well as a great, interesting, really fun, intimate way to get exposed to music. And through your experience, we've now learned how valuable this type of venue can be as a tool to bring arts and bring artistic enrichment to the developing world. And we're definitely grateful for the work that you've done with 88 International in that regard. You can find out more about our guest's work by visiting 88international.org and KimballGallagher.com. Kimball, this has been such a treat. We have just continued to be on this wonderful winning streak of amazing social entrepreneurs who are using the power of art as guests on our program, and we thank you for keeping that going. Before we let you go, sir, we got one last question for you. Do you have any last tips for the indie creators out there to help them move their careers forward?
Well, that's a great question. I think I would say the tip is always, if you can think about and imagine clearly where you want to go in your career, you can build a community that can help you get there. And I think thinking in those terms can really help, because whatever it is that you think you need, there's somebody out there that's an expert in it, or they're very good at it. And if one builds you can build your community in this way. And I think that can help move things along. We've certainly thought like that in terms of going country by country. How do we make our program in this country? Step one, build a community. And so that's the advice I would share at this point.
I love it. And I love that you brought it back to community. That's what this is all about. Our thanks to Kimball Gallagher and producer Lauren, and our thanks to all of our viewers and listeners for checking out Break the Business. We will see you next week.